So today on Hardy House Games, I'm going to show you how to win the Barcelona Cathedral-based dice game, Sagrada. Normally, I'm not a big fan of dice games. They always add an element of chance, and if the game relies too heavily on dice, winning kind of becomes more about luck than about actual strategy and execution. Which is why I was pleasantly surprised by how much fun Sagrada is. It's a game built entirely around dice, but there's actually a lot you can do to mitigate bad rolls and optimize the numbers and dice that are presented to you. Now, keep in mind, I'm assuming that you already know how to play this game. If you don't, go read a rulebook or something and come back. Now, in any game, whenever you're formulating a strategy, you always want to start out just by thinking, how do I actually win this game? It seems obvious, but a lot of people get caught up in all the details and they forget the final goal. So in Sagrada, the player with the most points wins. Duh. But remember, that means it's not the player who got the most public objectives or saved the most favor, it's points. So while you're playing, keep in mind every method you can use to get points, and don't get too attached to one specific method. So to get the most points, I've kind of narrowed it down to two overarching strategies. Number one, optimize your objectives. So in other words, just get as many points as you can from each objective card. And number two, mitigate your constraints. This means placing dice on your board that gives you the best chance for more options in the future. So let's first talk about optimizing objectives. There are three methods by which you can gain points: public objectives, private objectives, and leftover favor, which honestly is kind of the least lucrative way to get points. And I think that the method for the most potential for points is actually your private objective. If you're lucky enough to get several high numbers in your color, your score can just skyrocket. So for this reason, it's really important to pick a board that works well with your private mission. Now, every board is designed to work well with the public missions. You'll never have a board with a constraint that forces you to break one of the public objectives. For example, there's not a single board that has the same number twice on the same row, which is something that would totally ruin the row shade variety objective. All boards work great with public missions. Private missions, however, are a bit different. Boards with more suboptimal color restraints aren't as good. So pick the board that will allow you to play the most of your private objective color. I personally really like boards like Gravitas and Firmitas, boards with only one color. This gives flexibility to have a lot of one other very specific color, especially if it's actually a different color than the one that's constrained on the board. For example, if your private objective is green, you could potentially place 10 green dice like so, giving you a potential for 48 points in your private objective. Now, of course, I know this is a radical example, but it illustrates the importance of picking a board that works well with your private mission. In fact, I think it's commonly worth prioritizing your private mission over a public one. Okay, so the second overarching strategy is mitigating your constraint. Or in other words, setting up your board so that you're more likely to roll something that's valuable to you. One of the worst feelings in Sagrada is needing that very specific blue 4, and despite there being 9 dice on the table, that blue 4 is nowhere to be found. Or worse, the blue 4 did show up, but somebody took it before you had a chance to get it. And now you're stuck with an empty space on your board that no die can fit, and -1 point for the vacancy just to kick you while you're down. So you want to prevent that kind of thing from happening as much as possible. And there are actually a lot of ways to do this. So I've got 3 tips to kind of help you prevent that from happening. Tip number 1, place highly constrained dice early. In other words, try to avoid filling in blank white spaces on your board until later in the game, and focus on the specific spaces as early as you can. This will give you more flexibility in the late game when it's often harder to get the dice that you need. If you have more white spaces available, you're more likely to roll something that you can put on your board. Less risk of getting stuck with no options. And those options are critical at the end when you're trying to get your objectives. Tip number 2. Place dice that are the same color or same number diagonally from each other on the board whenever you can. This provides more options for the space next to them. So for example's sake, let's suppose you've placed your dice like this. Those yellows are both 3s. Sorry, the picture's kind of hard to see. But in this example, the space in the middle can only be occupied by 8 different dice. Anything else would be illegal to play. 8 options, that's okay, but still, those are only 8 rolls that would work for you. Now, in this overly idealistic example, you've placed 4 yellow 3s all diagonally from each other. In this example, you have 24 different options that could, minus the 3. So you have 20 options that could work. But even so, you're way more likely to roll something that you can place. 20 options is way better than 8. Now, I realize this is an oversimplification, but it illustrates the value of placing similar numbers and colors diagonally from each other. It gives more options in the future, and a higher likelihood that you'll roll something that you can at least play. Okay, tip number 3, don't underestimate the value of tools. It's amazing how easy it is to forget that tools exist. And it might cost you some points in favor to use them, but oftentimes you gain more points for using them than you would have if you just avoided it entirely. Also, generally it's better to wait to use tools towards the end of the game when you're more likely to have high constraint and less likely to roll dice that you want. Tools help you mitigate that risk of getting a bad roll. So in the end, you just have to keep your board as flexible as possible. Don't force yourself into needing 1 or 2 very specific dice so you don't get stuck with a roll that doesn't benefit you. And those are my tips and strategies for Sagrada. It's an excellent game that my wife and I just love to play. We actually had an awesome opportunity to go to the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona when we visited, and playing this game always reminds us of that really cool experience. So what are some of your strategies for winning Sagrada? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked this video, like and subscribe to our channel. Go check out some of our other videos. And be sure to check out our website. I'll leave it in the description, where we're actually designing and creating a board game of our own. It's kind of a Euro style game, civilization building with a secret identity mechanic built in. It's actually way fun, so keep an eye out for that. Anyway, enough shameless promotion. Have a great day, and now go in Sagrada.